Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Applicant Q&A webinar for the 9th call for recordings at risk. We are really glad that you can join us today. So to get started, we're going to be focusing on your questions today, but we have just a few slides to share. We want to start with an overview and a few reminders about our platform, Zoom. A live transcript is being generated if you'd like to utilize it. So to turn on this feature, click the CC Live Transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Attendees will be muted throughout the presentation, but you're very welcome to use chat for general introductions and conversation. If a chat box isn't already displayed on your Zoom screen, you can hover your mouse toward the bottom of the screen and open it manually. In order to send a message to everyone, please remember to check that the little window says to all panelists and attendees or to everyone. We ask that you use the separate Q&A box to pose your questions. This can be opened the same way as the chat box. Because we have limited time together today, please feel free to follow along with questions as they come in and to upvote the ones that would be particularly helpful for you to have answered. We will do our best to answer all the questions live. It's a pretty small group here today, so we should be able to do that. But we will also share responses to any questions, to all questions alongside the recording. And speaking of recording, the session recording and the transcript will be made available on the applicant resources page on our website following this event. So my name is Becca Kwan, and I'm joined today by my fellow program officers, Sharon Burney and Joy Banks. We'll be answering all of your questions during our time together, and we're also supported by our colleagues Allison Pope, Krista Williford, and Diane Ramirez. We also want to thank the team from AI Media for their assistance with live transcription today.
As you all start to think about the questions that you have, we wanted to start with a slide about a question that we've been receiving quite a bit between last webinar and over the email about eligible materials. And we wanted to take just a quick moment to highlight a few of the AV formats that have come up recently. And in sharing this, we want to re-emphasize that there is no definitive list of eligible materials for this program. We continue to encounter unusual AV formats that still fit within the priorities of this program. What is important as you consider whether or not the materials you have on hand fit this program, do remember that this was designed as a program to prioritize at-risk, time-based analog materials for preservation through digitization. So that's what you'll see reflected in our list of some of the eligible materials that we might encounter. Different sized film, all sorts of audio cassettes, VHS, lacquer discs, LPs, aluminum discs, any of those formats that are sort of the realm of audio and or visual materials. We cautioned last time about when you're thinking about CDs and DVDs. They are sort of eligible for the program, but we just caution that you keep them to a small proportion of your overall collection, just because we're focusing on the analog materials. And as a reminder, this program does not support file migration for previously digitized or born digital materials. And this is time-based media, so still images do not qualify for this program either. We continue to welcome your questions, so when in doubt, just reach out to us and we will answer all those questions for you if you ever have any doubts. So as you start to add your questions to our Q&A box, we did have one question come in through chat. Just a general curiosity about the program application requirements And if we have any examples of what a good application proposal might look like. Do you want to take that, Becca?
Sure, I can start us off. So the application, I'm trying to switch to a particular slide. Here we go. Here's an overview of the application and what we ask. So you'll see that we ask for a summary of your project, a description of the content that you're nominating. We ask you to talk about the scholarly and public impact, the risk assessment. So, why are these materials at risk? What are the factors that you're thinking about there? We ask you to think about the rights, ethics, and reuse of the materials. Your project design, so how long is it going to be? What are the steps involved? Your service provider information, you must choose a service provider to do the digitization work. So we ask for you to make a provisional selection there and to include their quote. And then the funding or budget that you're proposing and your own information. And so basic information about your organization. So that's a quick overview of the application. And then, to think about what makes a good application, I think bearing in mind the selection criteria for the program, which I can also put up here on the slide. The 4 criteria. Here, impact, urgency, potential for preservation, and approach to access. So those are the things that we ask our reviewers to look for within your application. So speaking to all of those throughout your proposal is really important. And Joy, I'll let you build on that.
Yeah, I'm going to drop a link in the chat because we do provide a number of successful proposals that our review panelists recommended to us as exemplary of the program. So you can check out on our apply for an award page in the document library. There's a dozen or so different proposals that you might want to browse through. Each of them sort of has strengths in different areas. So a lot of them have cover letters that will talk about whether or not their strength was in their rights, ethics, and reuse section, or their letters of support, or whatever it might be. So that might be a good idea if you're new to our program to sort of look through those and see the level of detail and length of a final application to the program. That'd be a good resource for you.
Yeah, so the next question I'm seeing that came through our chat is why is the minimum award $10,000? Why not fund smaller projects?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Why is the minimum award $10,000? Why not fund smaller projects?
That is an excellent question. I think that we, as a program team, we did reassess the size of the awards that we were granting a couple years ago in our last renewal to the Mellon Foundation. And we went back and forth a lot on both the minimum and the maximum levels. And ultimately, we landed on $10,000 to recognize the complexity of the application. It's designed to be more approachable, but we do appreciate the fact that we're asking for a high level of detail of understanding of the ownership of your materials, how you'll be able to provide access to them, if at all. We're asking for a well-defined digital preservation plan for your long-term preservation of the items post digitization. And we felt that $10,000 was kind of a good line to draw to sort of balance the complexities of the application with the award that you're being granted. Less than that, the application could be a bit onerous for the size of the award that you would get. It is something that we do continue to evaluate. And you may know at this point that the program is up for renewal again. And it's something that we will probably take into consideration as we think about this program and who we're really trying to serve through it.
Yeah, thanks, Joy. I'll hop to our Q&A box for the next question. Gregory asks, is quadruplex videotape within scope? I think this is a yes, Joy. Yeah.
I would say yes, it's videotape. We don't care about the brand, the format, the cassette, the carrier of the videotape. If it's videotape, it will be eligible. I just saw too that the link, apparently the bunch of sample proposals are having some issues on our website. We'll look into that and see if it's a link resolve issue or something else. But we have taken note of that and we'll make sure that we get that working again.
Yeah, I've made a note to look right after this. The next question, apologies if this is detailed in a part of the guidelines. Is it proper to include in our budgets any costs related to the manifesting, i.e. posting to websites, for instance, of the digitized outputs for work under RAR? Or does the scope conclude with finishing the transfer and the aftermath is separate?
Yeah, that is an excellent question, and one that our reviewers are interested in seeing addressed in applications. We see this sort of come to light in applications in a few different ways. For some institutions, they will only include digitization on their budgets. And then they might have internal resources to make sure that they can provide the access that they've presented in their application. For others, you may need the staffing support and within the restrictions of the allowable costs of the program, some of the other related activities, you might need to ask for funding from them. In terms of your timeline, you are asked in the Recordings at Risk program to provide the level of access that you have presented in your proposal. So if you've said that you're going to post everything online and you're going to have either item level or collection level metadata for it, then by the end of your project timeline, you should be able to produce that output. The program only requires that you provide and make your metadata, whatever metadata, however you're going to describe it, you have to make that accessible somehow online through a CC0 license or CC0 waiver, not waiver. So you're basically committing it to the public domain. So your timeline does need to take that into account. It's something that our recipients recognize, that the description of the materials often takes much longer than the actual digitization work. So perhaps designing a timeline where you're doing, if you've sent out your digitization, where you can work ahead on some of your description work so that you're prepared when the materials come back to provide the access and the metadata as you've described in your proposal. If you want to go on and do other work, that is fine, and we welcome that too. Our reviewers are always excited to see some of the future plans that you might have.
All right, so the next question is there a way to build in contingency if materials are not reformatable? For example, on visual inspection, a collection of VHS tapes looks good, but we can't really tell without playing them and would want our digitization vendor to be the one making the call and potentially repairing. If they cannot be salvaged / digitized, what would we do with the extra money? Yeah, this is a situation that we see very often with the program because, you really can't plan for those instances where you can't salvage content. So I think what we usually recommend is that you have some additional materials in mind that you might substitute in if you have any that are related to the collection that you've proposed. What else, Joy? What are some other options?
Yeah, depending on the project that you're doing, we've seen some projects take on like extra transcription or translation work. We can usually approve that in a reallocation of funds. You might think about alternative outreach activities that maybe weren't allowable in the application phase, but once you're funded, our goal is really to help you spend the money that we've given you. So we've done like some conference attendance, if it's related to the Recordings at Risk project, if there's a way to bring in advisory people who can help with describing the contents of the materials. There's all sorts of creative solutions where we will help you spend the money. And if we can't help you spend the money, we do have a policy about returning any funds greater than $100 left in your budget.
Yeah, so thinking about some of those possible plans now might be good, though you don't have to include them in your application.
It is a good idea usually to like have extra materials as you're looking at stuff, because we're seeing this more and more as the materials are truly at risk. We're seeing degradation of content more and more in the program. And so in recent cycles, recipients have sort of this, like, here's our primary set of things that we want to digitize, and then they will have a secondary set of materials still related to their proposal, the goals, the scope of what you're presenting, and they will be right there and ready when the vendor calls and says, well, we weren't able to capture 50, or a bunch of them were blank, or whatever it is, so you don't waste or lose any time.
All right, the next question, if the reformatted material is not provided online, do you have examples of how previous recipients have made their metadata available?
It's a variety of different ways, because we don't tell you how you have to make it available on purpose, because we recognize that you all are coming from many different organizations with a lot of different platforms. We've seen everything from, a PDF finding aid that they put on their website to item level metadata and cataloging records in MARC in their library catalogs, and sort of everything in between. So the idea is that if you're not able to make the items, the digitized items accessible, you do still want to have some level of knowledge that the work was done and that you have materials, either that people can access them on site or through contacting you or working through maybe community members to access the collections. There was a comment in chat, Becca, that maybe we want to address about a concern that some items that they might be nominating might be only interesting to a niche audience.
Yeah. So that is something that the reviewers will consider as they look, across the pool of applications, is the impact, right? Going back to the assessment criteria for the program. So as you think about whether to include those items and whether they fit within the scope of your project, I would say think about the potential uses for those items. Think about who you can get to speak to their importance and to demonstrate a wider interest or involvement. And your letters of scholarly support in those cases may be, what could demonstrate to reviewers that this is something that should be saved. So, weighing risk and urgency against those considerations too could be a way to make your case for those materials.
Yeah, we've seen some pretty specialized projects receive funding, and sometimes it takes a couple of times to really capture that excitement that you might have about it. And there was a project, well, you can look through all of our funded projects on the website.
I'm thinking about, in particular, there's one about whale sounds, for instance. I think, at first you might say, why are whale songs or whale sounds of particular interest? But those support letters and the the argument that they made for those in the application really convinced the whole panel the importance of the materials.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've gone through all the questions in the Q&A, but we do.
I'm seeing one more in the chat about word limits and concerns about writing too much or not enough. You want to take that one, Joy?
Yes, word limits. So for you, as you're approaching your applications, and when we, as the program staff, design this application and pass it along to the review panel, our advice to you is that you take the word limits as an indicator of sort of level of detail and the importance of the response that you're being asked to provide. So, if your summary is only about 100 words, but your rights, ethics, and reuse statement is 500 words, it should be an indicator to you that reviewers are usually expecting more detail when there's more words being requested. There are times when something might be very straightforward and you might not need to use all of the words that are being given to you, but generally speaking, it's usually a better idea to try to use all the words and the pages that have been given, making sure that you're really speaking to the specifics of your project, the particular materials that you're nominating, the audiences, the very specific audiences that you're hoping to connect with through the digitization of these materials, and using those review criteria that we provide, the 4 review criteria, to sort of guide your responses as you're trying to fill those empty spaces. I don't know if you had any more tips about that, Becca. We should maybe say that the word counts within the system will cut you off. You won't be able to submit a response that has more words than we're limiting you to. With the page count limits, though, it is possible to upload a document that exceeds our page limit. And we've made note as many times as possible to let you know that prior to sending the applications to the review panel, if there's something that has too many pages, the extra pages will be deleted from your upload before we send to reviewers. So we do recommend that you just double check once you've uploaded documents to the system that something weird didn't happen between that process, that all of a sudden you have an extra page or something.
Any other questions? Well, we'll wrap up there, I suppose. Let me get back to my closing slide. If any of you if you think of questions as you continue drafting your applications, please just shoot us an email. We're always happy to answer questions that way as well.
Oh, we just had another question come in. Is there one part of the application that you would recommend starting with? I feel like this is like such a personal question. If I were writing this application, I would probably start with the sections where you're working to identify the materials that you want to digitize. It seems like having a good handle on that is going to inform every other component, from your rights ethics reuse, your argument for why these materials would be of interest to others, who you're going to contact to get your letters of support, the vendor proposal that you're going to create. So I think I would probably start there and really working to identify the materials, the potential degradation, some general sense of the scope, so I know if my timeline is going to be good or not.
That makes sense to me. That's section 2, the description of content. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it could really, you start to make those connections to all the other parts of the application when you're assessing your materials and what to include. So thanks for that question. That was a great one.
I suppose the opposite of that is like, what would be the last thing that you write? No, I was an English major, so the last thing I always write to my papers was an introduction paragraph. So I would probably end with writing my summary.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense. All right, so I don't see any final questions coming in. So we will wrap up. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. Within the next few days, we should have all of these questions and answers typed out. We'll have the slides available and the recording. So please take a look on the applicant resources page. You can reach us at recordings@risk@clir.org. And follow us on Twitter @CLIR Grants. Don't forget, applications are due December 15th. So thank you all so much for joining us, and happy application writing.